1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters gon' move. Whatever click you choose, you better.
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. During those times, I accumulated some good stories and insight on prison. I'm going to share some with y'all today. If you happen to like this story, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a comment. Most importantly, hit that notification bell. That way, anytime I drop a story, you will be notified ASAP Rocky. You can hop on it whenever you're ready. Also, that song Still Steppin' is coming out soon, getting mixed and mastered as we speak. If you're interested in checking out more of my music, go to my YouTube playlist. Scroll down to gas stations, and I have several songs there. Now, let's hop right up into this story today. Now, what I'm going to be talking about is a well talked about topic to a certain degree. It's about the Corcoran staged cage fights. And what that was, it was inmates who were in the SHU in Corcoran. Now, the SHU is an acronym for the Security Housing Unit, which is basically almost like a jail within a jail. It's a place where they would send convicts who receive disciplinary actions in prison, whether it was for violence, for drugs, what have you. And so they was mandated to give them a certain amount of exercise. And so they created these exercise yards where they would send the convicts. Now, these exercise yards was basically concrete enclosures, I believe. And I have never been there. So, I've got a lot of information from people that I've done time with. And so, but I believe the yards were about 70 feet long, and at the widest at Corcoran, about 25 feet. So basically, it was a small enclosure. On each side of the enclosure, you had a guard in the tower who was about 10 feet up. Now, somewhere, I believe around 1988, the California Department of Corrections implemented a policy where they were going to have rival gang members exercise together in these SHU yards, I guess with the thought that they would get them to be able to coexist in the SHU, then they could coexist better on the yard. Or at least that's what they claimed they were trying to do. So, of course, you had Northern Hispanics, you had Southern Hispanics, you had blacks, and you had white inmates going to these yards. A lot of these people who were going to these yards, of course, well-documented enemies as far as CDC was concerned. CDC knew about that. So when they would go to the yard, fights automatically broke out all the time. Fights automatically broke out all the time. And then to stop some of these fights, you had guards in the tower who would shoot these guys with 9mm rifles. Now, let me explain to you, if you've never been to prison in California, when you are in the SHU, or the hole as some people call it, you're stripped away. You have no access to the general population. In many instances, you may not have appliances in there, your TV and stuff like that. And so also, before you come out the cell, you have to strip search. Basically, you have to take your boxers off, hand them to the police outside the food slot. You have to take off your t-shirt, all that. You turn around, you lift your feet up, you squat and cough, you bend over, you show them your anal cavity, all these type of things to make sure that you are not hiding a weapon. Then you're handcuffed. You stick your hands back out through that slot, then they escort you to the yard. The guards definitely knew that none of these convicts out on the yard had a weapon. but yet and still, many convicts who went to this yard were shot. I've read where it was 50 was shot, and it was actually over 50, and 7 were definitely killed. But I want to talk particularly about a name that I have not heard mentioned often, a particular black inmate by the name of Preston Tate. I believe he was killed April the 2nd, 1994, if I'm not mistaken. By the time I got to the prison, which was in 96, the whistle had been blown on what was believed to be stage fighting. They would have these different convicts from different areas of the SHU come to these particular yards, and basically the guards was pairing them up to fight other prisoners, betting on them and stuff like that. It was a spectacle. They'd have a lot of COs, different COs, secretaries up in the tower to watch these guys go to fight, which is why they started calling them Gladiator School. Now, I heard a lot about the brother who was killed, Preston Tate. I heard a lot of brothers refer to him as being the champ back then. A lot of the guards would call him the champ because he always won the fights that he was paired off against. And so at some point in time, he was released to go to the SHU yard, got into a fight with some Hispanics, and he was shot and killed. Well, I always wondered, because from what I heard, he was liked a lot by the guards. And how sometimes in prison, just like any other situation, any other setting, once the story gets told over and over and over, bits and pieces may be added on to it. Bits and pieces may be taken off. Things may be embellished or whatever. But I'm a curious person, and so I always wondered, well, if he was so well liked, why did he get shot? Why was he shot on the yard and killed? And no one could never, tell me why. Not too long ago, when I was scrolling through YouTube, I seen a clip that I'm about to insert in the video for you guys by a white inmate who says that he was the lieutenant's clerk, I believe, on the day Preston Tate was killed. And he goes on to explain why actually Preston Tate was killed. And so I'll let you guys check that out right now.
Like I said, I was a captain's clerk. I actually wrote the reports for these. It's called an 837 incident report. Young man by the name of Preston Tate, and he had got into an altercation with a black guard on the tier. Preston spit in the guard's face. And so what happened is that he was set up the next morning. He was led out to the yard with 2 opponents, Mexican rival gang. And within 2 minutes, that guard, which Preston had spit in his face, he went up into the tower. He was actually a floor guard. He didn't have any business being in the tower. He went up into the tower, grabbed an M14 and shot Preston in the head. 2 hours before that happened, as a clerk, I received the central files of all 3 inmates that were going to be involved in this altercation and the notes associated with the fact that he had been shot in the head. I had the report prepared before the altercation even occurred.
Now, his take on that was extremely interesting, right? Because I've heard many people say how the COs would pair people off sometimes as a disciplinary measure because they had some type of beef or they had some type of problem. And so they would basically try to have a person disciplined by sending them to the yard with somebody who was known to win a whole lot of fights and stuff like that, which was extremely cold. And so I'm going to read something for you guys right now, if you just give me a second. And this is not about Preston Tate, but another individual by the name of Vincent Tolomis, who was also shot out there on the Corcoran yard, and his family sued. And it says, in one of the largest prison brutality settlements ever, the state of California has agreed to pay $2.2 million to an inmate paralyzed for life by a guard's bullet during a fight at Corcoran Prison in 1993. Vincent Tolomis, 33, was shot in the neck during a fight allegedly set up by officers in the prison security housing unit. According to depositions in the case, neither Tolomis nor his rival was carrying a weapon or posing serious harm to each other when the gun post officer fired the 9mm bullet. In agreeing to settle the lawsuit this month, one of several recent cases in which the state has paid large awards for inmates' deaths and injuries, the Department of Corrections admitted no wrongdoing. It was clearly in the best interest of the state to see if a settlement could be made short of continued litigation, Correctional Director Kyle Terhune said. Tolomis, who was serving a 3-year sentence for drug possession, was 9 months shy of his release at the time of the shooting. Paralyzed from the neck down, the 6'4" Hawthorne resident said the settlement doesn't come close to compensating him for all that he has lost. He goes on to say, "My life today is worse than incarceration. You're looking at a man who can't even wipe a tear from his eye, who can't blow his nose," he said. "I'm constantly going to the bathroom on myself, constantly needing to be changed like a baby. Corcoran State Prison took away all my pride, all my dignity, and all they got was a slap on the wrist." Tolomis said the May 1993 fight was instigated by 2 officers who approached his cellmate, a Mexican gang leader, and demanded that the Mexican inmate be punished for bad-mouthing guards. Cellmate then ordered Tolomis to take care of business on behalf of the officers. Just prior to the fight, Tolomis testified, the gun post officer approached him and said, "Today is the day." From 1989 to 1995, 7 inmates were killed and 43 were wounded by guards firing assault rifles to stop inmate fights at Corcoran. Like Tolomis' case, many of the fights occurred in the security housing unit with the knowledge or approval of correctional officers. The practice of guards pairing off rival inmates in tiny concrete exercise yards became known as gladiator days. When the convicts then failed to heed the call to stop fighting, officers opened up fire in the name of preventing inmate injuries. Shooting at inmates engaged in fistfights, unheard of in other states, wasn't limited to Corcoran. At maximum security prisons statewide, 39 inmates were killed and more than 200 were injured from 1989 to 1998. In nearly every instance, review boards made up of prison officials deemed the shootings justified. It wasn't until last year, when a series of stories in the Times detailed the failure of the state's officials to stop the shootings, that a new review was ordered. An independent panel of law enforcement officials examined 31 deadly and serious shootings at Corcoran and found that nearly 80% were not warranted. Since the articles, not a single inmate has been shot or wounded in California. In November, a San Francisco jury awarded $2.3 million to the family of inmate Mark Adams, who was killed while fighting another San Quentin inmate in March 1994. Last year, the state also agreed to pay $825,000 in the April 1994 shooting death of Corcoran inmate Preston Tate, who was mistakenly killed by a bullet intended for his rival. Last month, the Corrections Department requested more than $91 million in additional funds from the state legislature to cover a deficit partly due to unforeseen legal costs associated with brutality cases and inmate medical costs. The Tolomis case presented a stiff challenge to corrections officials because of the extent of his injuries and the fact that the gun post officer was also involved in the second shooting, this one deadly, a few months later. Tolomis recalled that his cell door was opened by a remote control around 10 a.m. on May 14, 1993. He headed for the exercise yard. Before he got there, he was strip searched as usual and checked with a metal detector. A few seconds later, he said the gun post officer looked down from his fortified position and asked if the fight was going to happen as scheduled. The officer denied in a deposition making such a comment. Tolomis, who had also been involved in prison brawls before, said everyone knew that the fight was going to happen before the yard even opened that day. He said the gun post officer and another guard had approached his cellmate. He said the officers told the cellmate that an inmate from Los Angeles named Alberto Beltran was talking rudely to female staff and had to be taught a lesson. They told my cellie that Beltran needed to be dealt with, and my cellie turned to me and said, "I want you to take care of it," Tolomis recalled. "I was being used to get back at Beltran, and I had no choice but to fight." Beltran, a foot smaller than Tolomis, stepped up and they began trading blows, according to the incident report. The gun post officer said he yelled several times to stop fighting, but the two combatants ignored him. Fearing that Beltran was in imminent great bodily harm, The officer said he chambered a round into his 9mm assault rifle and fired once, striking Tolomis in the back of the neck and shattering his spine. The officer did not fire the customary warning shot from a 37mm gas gun that discharges wooden blocks. So anyway, I find it just extremely ironic that what he has to say almost lines up with a lot of what the guy who said he was the clerk at the time said. Now to me, it's just, it's messed up, man. So eventually, when Preston Tate was murdered, you had a guard who, I guess he was upset about it or whatever, and he blew the whistle on what was going on. You had 8 officers who was brought up on federal charges and brought to trial a couple of years later. Now, of course, they was found not guilty. The reasoning was they was just following policy that CDCR had established in stopping of these fights, what have you. My question is this, though. What type of human could even be happy with a policy that gave him permission or gave him a license to kill 2 people having a fist fight? It's crazy that how with all these shootings, no one had a problem with that, right? In my opinion, they're much worse than gang members. I'm going to share something with you guys, right? No matter how stupid it may sound, no matter how brainwashed I may have been, no matter how ignorant I may have been at the time. One day, me and my homie was riding around, right? My homie had been to the pen before, had dealt with a lot of racism, skinheads, Nazis in the pen. I had never been to the pen at that particular time. He's told me, hey, man, let's go shoot a couple white dudes. I said, no, man, can't do that, right? I said, now what we can do, go up here, bust on some of these other dudes. And when I say other dudes, I'm talking about black gang members or whatever, Now, as ignorant as that may sound, yeah, that I'm caught up in, shooting at my own or whatever. But my reason to justify my thoughts was because we had all signed up to gangbang. My justification of being okay with shooting at other blacks was they would shoot at me. So at least I had a reason. I was unwilling to just go shoot at an innocent person who had never done anything to me, no matter how foolish that thought may have been, that I'm willing to, go shoot at somebody else black. But like I said, at that point in time, it was a subculture that I was fully immersed in. And in my opinion and my mind, so were these other dudes who I was willing to shoot at. And so, but like I said, for these guards to be able to kill a person behind a fist fight, to me, that's, those dudes are pretty sadistic in their own right. And so the dude who actually is in the thumbnail, a homie of mine by the name of Chances, I've done a story or 2 on him. And at some point, he was also back there in Corcoran when these fights and stuff was going on. Now, I can't remember the exact words, but verbatim, but he told me something like this when he was back there. He said at some point he realized that the guards was using the honor of a convict not to tell against the guards was using that against the convicts by basically going out there and killing them. He sent word to all his homies from IE not to go to yard no more. Now, you may have some people who will say, oh man, they was out there, they was scared. But my question for those who may say something like that, what are you going to say to the families of the men who basically went to those yards and got killed for nothing? There's no way, according to, once again, my homeboy Chances' theory, the playing field wasn't level. There's no way to show honor and valor to a person who's not showing you that same honor and valor. There's no way to go out here and level the playing field when this person is going to shoot you for a fist fight. And also another thing he stressed is the reason why a lot of these people who were getting shot were the ones who would have altercations, the ones who would have beefs with guards. You disrespect somebody, the next time you go to the yard, you can plan on getting shot. And so he despised convicts doing the bidding of the officers who didn't care about you. And so that was his reasoning for sending a kite and getting word to all his homies back there in that hole not to go to the yard. Sometimes, and I believe, like I say, I never was back there, but how they would do the yard is they may just come to your cell one day, you and your cellie, say, hey, you guys want yard? So you'd go to the yard, you'd walk through, you might look out there, you see two Southerners out there, a lot of times from what I heard, they would just step back, put the back up against the wall, the Southerners would rush them, reason being, I was told that that's how they would beat the 115, by saying that they were just defending themselves and not being the aggressors in the attack. But like I said, I heard a lot of people speak about Preston Tate, and I always wondered if he was so liked by the guards, because a lot of times the guards would bet on these fights. They would win stuff, they'd bet, and so Preston Tate was known as the champ from what I heard a lot. And like I said, I was always wondering why, if he was so well liked by the guards, why was he killed? But anyway, that's just a little interesting story, a different twist, talking about the cage fights that people may have not heard of. Like I said, a lot of people wonder why you have a lot of convicts or former convicts who have a great disdain for law enforcement, because there is a lot of underhanded, sneaky stuff that goes on. Imagine being in the world of somebody. Now, when I'm saying in the world of somebody, I'm talking about you're in basically somebody else's world, because when you're under the control or thumb of any person who you see as an oppressor or who acts as an oppressor, anything he says basically is the law of the land. He's going to write you up for whatever. It's going to be heard by someone higher than him, one of his constituents. And of course, they're going to stick with each other because it shows support. If they're out here running around, putting their life on the line on the yard, and I failed to mention that the person who's going to hear the write-up or the disciplinary action that's wrote up by the foot soldier, which is basically the correctional officer, the lowest level of correctional officer, it's going to be the disciplinary action, which is known as a 115, has to be heard by no lower than a lieutenant. So the lieutenant is going to hear this. He's going to read the report. He's going to find you guilty, because if he finds you not guilty of whatever this officer has wrote you up on too many occasions, now you are demoralizing the morale of the officers. You guys aren't standing together, and you're not unified, and no one wants to feel they're not supported by the higher ups. And so it's it's a cold situation, man. I've heard many stories of convicts being lied upon, wrote up on false charges, guards planting knives in the cells, all types of stuff, and how do you beat something like that? How do you beat something like that when the robbers are being judged by other robbers? When I say that, I'm talking about these crooked officers. Not every single officer that works CDC is crooked, but you definitely have a gang type of mentality. The same way that the convicts operate. I've had a guard or two personally tell me that we deal with problems the same way that you guys deal with problems, meaning that if you have an officer going around doing dumb stuff, he's disrespecting you guys unnecessarily, we discipline him. And his reason being is because if one of you guys should happen to take off on him, or if you guys take off on him, we have to respond to that incident. And now he's jeopardizing our safety, our livelihood, us seeing our families, so on and so forth. So, they operated basically under the same codes and regulations that a lot of the gang members did. And of course, you have guards in prison who don't like the charges that some of the convicts are in there for, in the same manner that convicts don't like some of the charges that convicts have. So just because a person dons on a guard suit, he doesn't automatically become infallible or without fault. So just keep that in mind for all you people out there who think that because a person works in the capacity of law enforcement, he suddenly becomes an angel. They have dislikes like everybody else, and they have a certain more widespread authority to wield evil over you in the event they should choose to do so. So anyway, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.
Them crackers let me out the gate, now the pressure's on. We about to get this shit straight like a pressing cone. The wrong cat to get aggressive on. I bring the bitch up out of niggas while you think they got them dresses on. My reach long and that's the best type. To have some dirty white boys come and smoke you like a meth pipe. And leave your chest bright red like a fire truck. Kicking your mom's door at night, nigga, and tie her up. I'm wild as fuck and I'm respected by the new youth. I put this pistol in their ear like a Bluetooth. I blow their brains on their new coupe. And have red everywhere just like a function full of soup whoops. Tell your troops I deal with beef like a butcher. My 4-5 pump more guys than Ashton Kutcher. Line pusher, quick to bury your clown. Nigga, I stayed in the park like the merry-go-round. Get it?
The game greasy, bitch, the game need me.
Oh, you niggas don't know my name.
The game greasy, bitch, the game need me.
I'm out here doing my
The
thing.
game greasy, bitch, the game need me.
I swerve in my own
The
lane.
game greasy, bitch, the game